On a surcharge, which he was going to institute as the national wear dress code. That a surcharge would be the high, like it would go to any function with a surcharge from now. It's going to be the national wear. After he had accepted the fact that the youths should not use ties. And he made it the national dress code of men, like the shirt jack. So I was showing where Mr. Leblanc clearly understood and was part of the liberation movement, and he was taking our protest even to shape national policy, which I find was very amazing, and it was encouraging. I mean, as youths, when the leadership would accept, your advocacy and your drive towards African heritage. I mean, it was very inspiring to us. So we continued seeking knowledge of our heritage, and all this agitation that we were having with the culture, the European culture, was because we were so touched by the stories of slavery. We were the generation most touched by what the slaves went through. It really touched us, and we wanted to know how we could do something about that. When we understood about the way they would treat, runaways, burning them by the stake, and cutting them up into quarters like animals, and hanging them in certain strategic spots where they would say where people would be leaving or coming into the town, where they would serve as deterrents. It really got us on edge, and we delved more into African heritage, we and because of our approach towards the struggle, our decolonized approach towards the struggle, we were being inspired by our ancestors immediately, because I think that's the first step towards the liberation struggle, is to decolonize, is to dissimulate, because we went through this period of simulation where they got us to hate our culture. And when we start loving our culture, I think our ancestors gravitate towards us, and that is what was happening. So we were inspired further to, and then in those days it wasn't good enough to just know something. We actually had to do something about it. That's the way we were taught. So we realized that some of us would have to sacrifice our lives to really disseminate the information we had, or the inspiration we had on a broader level, because the island was suffering from lack of knowledge, this type of knowledge. Yeah, well, some of us decided that we would have to sacrifice our lives, to disseminate the information, and including myself and some others. And there was this movement that was happening in the four corners by the guys, the forerunners of the liberation movement. They were the foot soldiers of the Black Power movement, who didn't see the movement as getting anywhere. The movement being led by Rosie and some of the intellectuals, students that had traveled. They didn't see the movement making headway, so they decided to take a different road. Instead of the communist road, they decided to take a...
But let me ask you. Algie was the man who led me. I was 18 years and Algie led me into Granby with a group of us, armed, to help Granby people take the estate from Nazi. So since from that time, I just developed a militancy since I moved in with Algie to Granby, and we successfully, helped the Granby people getting at the land from Nassif. And so that is why, and I could display that type of militancy in Algie Yard, where I took away a dread from 3 policemen in a car, and then when they come back, about 6 policemen came back in a them time it was the Land Rover, the short wheel Land Rover, a black one with a white stripe on the side. They came back full of policemen armed with SLR, and they start shooting. I think it was 3 or 3, and they start shooting at me profusely, and then I had to get away, and it was in Algie yard. So when I was out of the way and I had composed myself, we all shot back at them simultaneously. It was 4 shotguns blazing at the same time, and 2 policemen started bawling, I bleeding, and they ran and left the Land Rover jeep. You know, they ran out of sight, out of range of our arms, and we all said to the hill. One time I was called on radio, on DBS, to explain to the nation if we knew what we were doing as Reds, and I told them, yeah, we were black nationalists, we were Pan-Africanists, and we were advocating black liberation, and that was the first time they were really getting the fact that we were black nationalists. I told them we made Cadence music, and that is the preservation of our advocacy. That is the documentation of the advocacy. If you know the lyrics, associated with Cadence music, you would see all what we represented: our spirituality, our morality, our black nationalism. And everything that we represented is in Cadence music. We wanted to build a moral African society. That is all we wanted. We didn't want to be in power in Dominica. We wanted the society to be oriented Afrocentrically. And that is what we were about. But the forces of colonialism that was with our people, they tried to stop it. And they upset it, they turned it around because they wanted to maintain a neo-colonial system on the island. And we bit the bullet, we bite the bullet, we did, they make us bite the bullet, they come at us real heavy-handedly.
For no reason at all, really.
Well, they wanted to reverse the revolution we wanted, the black revolution we had started on the island, because the people who had higher into what we were saying, and they were, we were getting people to be sympathetic to the cause. And they saw it was happening because the island is natural and we were advocating natural living. It was catching fast, and they saw it like threatening, the capitalist system, because we were bringing the people together in a brotherhood, in one family, because among us we live like family. We were like, we had reached a stage where we were family. They would even ridicule us when we would say share brother share. That was a ridicule. They would ridicule that in society because that was so far-fetched from them to share with each other. And then they hear saying share brother share. They laugh at that, and it was happening. We shared our clothes. The only thing we didn't share was our women, because we shared clothes, we shared food, we shared money, our vehicle, our homes. Your home was my home. You check? Your vehicle was my vehicle. You drove it, but you would contribute to any mission I had. You were committed to help me, and we accepted that. We accepted our responsibility to our brethren, and I mean that was the most amazing time of my life, when we could live as brothers. And if we weren't so coordinated and together, we could never go through the Dread Act. We could never survive, because plenty of time when society was against us, we just had to meet a brother and converse with him and tell our stories and sit down and empathize with one another, and we would be able to move on. Because we didn't get any sympathy from our homes. We didn't get it from any institution. All we got was persecution. But the brotherhood we had built kept us going, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, so like when we decided to go to the hills, what we learned from them was, most importantly, was the herbal medicine. You understand?
Okay.
It's like today you find most of the herbal doctors and so on the island are Rastas, and it was because of that. A lot of the guys, the early dress, they took interest in herbal medicine,
Okay.
natural healing, so that is we learn a lot of medicinal herbs and their uses, and so, and a major thing, people are herbal doctors on the island and herbal people who do deal with herbal remedies are Rastas, and it was because of what we learned from the elders. And so, but the most important thing we learned was the maid husbands. That would mean a man who delivers babies. Some of the Rasta men, they learn how to deliver their babies, and they successfully delivered babies in the hills, their children in the hills. And the children grew up healthy. So that was a very important thing we learned from the elders.
How did they learn that?
But the elders would just show them how to do it, and they would be able to deliver, cut the baby navel, take out the baby from the vagina, wherever it was coming.
Cut the umbilical cord, all them things.
Cut the umbilical cord, whatever. And the children, I know one of those children had got the island scholarship at grammar school. A girl, the child came to a Burton couple from somewhere from Roseau. They were living at Waterwaven, and the guy delivered his child, it read, and the child was very successful in high school at the same time.
So what happened after that now to make you guys say that Mr. Leblanc was really in with you guys? He implemented the shirt jack as being the national way for the men in government, right?
Yeah.
And what other movement? Were there any other acts after that?
Well, there were hardly any other acts
Okay.
after that by Mr. Leblanc. It's just that he seemed to have been having a hard time from the bourgeois section of society. I understood that they were trying to bribe him, and he wasn't taking bribes. One time I heard that a businessman had tried to give him some shirts, 2 shirts, and he declined. He said, "But this was only one back I have." So it was difficult for them to manipulate him. And soon after that, he decided that he would leave office, and he would even speak about, he retired to his home in Vegas, and he would hardly speak about politics.
Speak to me about Will Strathmore during that time and him. You see that they fell out. They fell out. And why was that now?
Well, it was because Mr. Stephen and some other members of his cabinet, they were dissatisfied with his approach towards the governance. And I think he was leaning towards black liberation, and they were being very conservative. And what they were saying is that he was moving away from the party's policy, and therefore that it would be dangerous for the party, So, and even maybe for the country too.
Just because he was backing you guy, because
like his consciousness was advancing beyond the neo-colonial era that we were in at the time, So they got very suspicious about him, because at that time, even the Black Power movement that that was disseminating the information, they were thinking of a communist revolution, and that wasn't going down well with the population of Dominica, So, and I think that was the fears that certain members of the Black Power movement and certain people who held the ideas within his party, he was promoting them, and they got very suspicious that the island maybe would go communist. I think that was the problem, that was the. Yeah, so they were suspicious about him, and they wanted the island to remain conservative.
Yes.
And they were planning this thing, and
So it was the bourgeois class now that really stirred up.
I don't think it was the bourgeois class so much at that time. It was just the conservative members of his cabinet.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
and it wasn't the bourgeois at that time. The bourgeois were trying to influence him as leader. You know, to even be more conservative. They would be able to execute all their capitalistic plans through him. They were hoping to do that.
Okay.
So when he left, he replaced himself with Patrick John, because I think Patrick John was the one who helped him to discover the plot and so on. I mean, he saw a good candidate in Patrick.
So was Patrick John the deputy prime minister at the time?
No, he was the secretary of the party, you know.
Okay.
He was the secretary of the party, I think, at the time.
Well, let me ask you a question. In those days, a lot of the intellectual young professionals who came at the time were a big percentage of the upper class, were children of the upper class who sort of revolted towards that their own system that benefited themselves and their family.
Exactly, because they went out there. You know, they could afford to send their children out there. These well-to-do people, so they were the first educated. But then they came across the truth out there.
So back then, at that time, how did they travel? On boat or on plane?
Well, the plane, the airport was operating. Those travels to America was on plane for sure. You had the banana boat going to England. So some people went to England on the banana boat.
Yeah.
You know, and there was between the islands there was the federal maple and the federal palm, because it was a symbol of a federation they wanted to form in the West Indies.
Yes.
You know, it had started, and that was one of the tokens that they had to have movement between all the islands. So they came up with two boats that would ply the islands from north to south, from Jamaica to Guyana.
Okay. So tell me about let me bring you back to what you were saying now. The Four Corners.
Yeah, so those guys who came back from college or university with the liberation ideas, they had formed this Black Power movement on the island, and the guys of Four Corners were like the foot soldiers.
Can you give us a geographical physical location where Four Corners is right now, or where it was? What buildings are there right now? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, it's in the center of Roseau. It's on Kennedy Avenue, where it crosses the street that goes out of town. You know, there was in the area where the Muslims, Shabbos had his first Muslim store. You know, and I think Gashet is on the other side there.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can picture that's right. Okay.
Yes,
that like central cell.
Yeah, central cell.
Okay.
So that was the most controversial block on the island.
Back then. Okay. And give me a year.
That was about in 70, 71,
1971,
69, 69, 70, 71, 72, up to the time of the Dread Act.
Okay.
You know, because that to me that is the cradle of dreads.
Yes.
That was the cradle of dreads.
Cradle of dreads.
Yes, that's where all the radicals met.
Yes.
That's where marijuana was smoked and sold.
Yes.
That's where police could raid at any minute.
Yes.
And you know, like try to get somebody selling marijuana or smoking in those days. Even a roach was controversial, was illegal. You know, and the police could make raids there anytime. Sometimes we had people who did business, you know, like guys who did like who would have stolen goods, you know, transacting around there. It was a radical block. So you know, that is those guys they saw themselves as trying to advance the struggle. That is the conscious guys of the Black Power movement. They wanted to advance the struggle. I used to be around them because I had a brother who was one of them, and they accepted me in their ranks. So sometimes I would go to party with them. You know, we would go out in the night. On weekends I would go out with them. We would smoke together, and they would be talking, and I really noticed something about them. Like they had a lot of love, and they were very conscious. You know, they were conscious of a lot of things. So I stopped with them. They were conscious of history. They were conscious of the Black Revolution that was going on around the world. You know, they were conscious of spirituality. Where they studied. You know,
so your brother Liquor was part of that group.
Yes. They studied monastic discipline, like the monks from Tibet. We had literature on Hinduism. And that is, I think, where we got our vegetarianism from, because we studied the cultures of the East.
Yes.
And we saw, it was a more spiritual form of diet. And so we went vegetarian. And these guys...
So with that, let me pause you a while. So then, you guys honed that whole living, that holistic approach of living by studying East Indian way of living
Eastern way of living. Yes, spiritual way of living.
So it wasn't from the teaching of Rastafari. You all didn't have literature back then. For let's say from Jamaica came down with books and showing you Rasta live and everything there.
No, that's not how we started. We started by a broad international
which is very interesting.
Knowledge,
very interesting.
And we didn't
different branches come and join to the same route.
Yes.
You understand?
So it was knowledge that brought us
knowledge.
And then the Black liberation knowledge was foremost. We understood at that time the countries of Africa, they saw, through the exploitation of colonialism, and they were breaking the shackles.
So at that time, that consciousness, the African consciousness, was just prevalent in your minds. It wasn't nothing but Rasta as yet.
No, we weren't Rasta at first.
Okay.
We just wanted to be liberators, and we wanted to be spiritual people. We wanted to be clean.
So were you all growing your hair already, or just?
Yeah, we were growing our hair already. Immediately as African people, we had hired to these.
So but the hairstyle was different, more like an afro or something, or was it dreadlocks already?
Well, it started with the afro at first.
And plaits or something?
And plaits, yes. It started with the afro and plaits.
Yes.
But we were gravitating towards African heritage.
So at what point did that meeting point happen, that crossroad between Rasta and your African spiritualism and way of and because we turned from the afro and the plaits to the dreadlocks.
Yeah. Even when we had dreadlocks, we still weren't Rastas.
But do you also
weren't Rastas when
as
we had
yet?
We were just adherents to African culture.
Okay.
Dreadlocks
So you're good locks now as African culture.
African.
Okay. Very interesting point.
Because
very interesting.
Because it's an African culture.
Very interesting.
It started long before us.
Youths and youths, listen and learn.
Yeah, it happened. It started. Lock started long before Rasta. So we were into the African heritage, and we followed up on all, the practices like natural practices. We wanted to be natural. We used calabash, we used coconut shell utensils, we used clay pots. We wanted to use spring water. We were very conscious. These guys were very conscious about the effects of chemicals on the body and the earth. So at an early time, they went off soft drinks and tin stuffs. That's how they started. That is, they wouldn't, even though they would eat fish, but they wouldn't eat it from a tin. They wouldn't eat imported stuff, So, and then, a certain time they decided that to get in the liberation struggle going and expanding, would have to ground with the people. Would have to go to the hills and ground with the people, and at the same time, disseminate the information.
So how did you all have a structure in place to bring that to the masses? How did you house it at the time?
Well, there is the structure we had in our mind.
To go to the hills.
Go to the hills and work with the people and to live the life we were talking about, and to prove that it was sustainable. It was sustainable. We had to show that, and we find by doing that, it would be we would be successful. And we started, and it was, because people were adhering, went to the hills, and we were living like as we wanted to live. We wanted to live natural, and we were living that way, and we were running with the people in the hills who welcome us, and who learn from us, and we learn from them, because as we were young and youths, there was a lot of natural things that they did in the hills that we weren't aware of, we didn't have the knowledge of.
Such as
certain foods that they ate, like things like Roku, things like Roku, and even African palm oil was around. And we didn't know that it was an edible thing until, I don't know, we got to know that by just wanting to use natural things. And we started using, African palm oil. Even fruits, the island, at that time, too many islanders were afraid of fruits. There was a stock of fruits hurting people, fruits doing all kind of things with people. And to me, people, it was like taboo in our time. Fruits was like taboo, and we just fell in on fruits and started eating fruits all in the night. We would eat fruit for our meal, and it did nothing to us. We we were such fruities that we ate fruit so much that one of the traits, when the Dread Act was formulated, one of the traits as to find out whether one was a dread is to see them if they are eating fruits in the public. But because, if a man is eating fruits in the public, whether he has locks or not, he was considered a dread. So much we had taken to fruits.
So the term dread was being used before Rasta then?
Yes, we were dreads for sure.
So,
I was there.
So then there wasn't no Rasta in them time there, Leblanc?
No, now and then a Rasta from Jamaica would come and tell us about Rasta. We wanted to know about Rasta, but we couldn't be Rastas without understanding why they were doing what they were doing, why they were hailing Selassie as a divine leader. We didn't understand that, and we didn't really take part in that. I must be truthful. The news had reached Jamaica, and when I went to Jamaica, I think I went to Jamaica in '77 for the first time, and they told me, well, they understand that Dominica has rebellious youth that is used to believe in Selassie. I could appreciate that because it was true. We didn't believe in Selassie, and
at that time, and we wanted to know what this divinity was about, and before we accept it, and we were comfortable with Rastas, with dress, being dressed, and so we this movement started by them guys leaving the Four Corners and teaming up with guys from the grammar school and going to the hills. I can remember the first camp. The first camp was were guys from pure guys from Four Corners, only guys from Four Corners. They had settled on in a place they call Livia Clay. It was a piece of land donated by Peter's Aline's father. He had given the piece of land to Peter. He was a lawyer, a Queen's Counsel lawyer. That is Peter Aline's father. Now, Peter Aline being a dread and wanted to go to the hills, his father gave him a piece of land he had control over, had authority over in Livia Clay area. And they set up a camp there, a group of them. Guys left their work. Guys left their their field of working. They were fishermen, they were electricians, they were civil servants, and then I at a certain time I ended up there being a student from grammar school. Peter Aline himself was a student, a law student of St. Augustine. He was he wasn't graduated as yet. How they call it, pre-graduate? How they call that? Pre-graduate.
Yeah, so he was a pre-graduate.
Something like that,
or postgraduate, right? No, not two. So anyway, people have their different walks of life, and they came together, and they were financed by a dread. He was from the town. Later I found out he was financed. He had financed that camp. The guy who. The attitude towards the police attitude towards us was terrible from day one. Like from the days of Four Corners, they just targeted the guys from Four Corners. And it wasn't because of the illegal things that was going on per se, like the marijuana smoking or guys, radical guys would be around there. It was our ideology that was under attack. They were trying to discourage us, and so they would search us arbitrarily. Marijuana had become like a no. You just couldn't have marijuana because they use that as a pretext to search us, and arrest us, and you could be searched. Let's say you're on a journey, you could be searched 3 or 4 times by the police, because as though at that time the police was just as though they were geared, or they were directed at us like no other crime mattered, but just a dread smoking marijuana or having marijuana or planting marijuana. That's all that mattered. That's all that mattered to the police. So we were hunted down, and when we went to one of the reasons why we went to the hills too was because of all that harassment. And then when we went to the hills, it didn't stop. They came and they would burn our camps. And dig up our beds, our food, and just trying to discourage us, break up our utensils. They would be bories and clip pots and things. And at a certain time, I personally, at a certain, I got so discouraged and anxious about that we started lifting up guns. We had guns, but not to attack the police or to attack the authority. We had guns basically to protect ourselves. But we always believe we should have guns to protect ourselves. And even at that first camp, when the police raided that camp, every man had a gun under his pillow.
Yes.
But Peter Allen, because it was his land, he took full responsibility for all the guns. As I say, we were having guns to protect ourselves because the police was brutalizing us and we feared for our lives, So even when after the shooting, when we ran and was in the hills, we went in the hills and we were considered armed and dangerous, and the police were looking for us. And when they got where we were, and so even I escaped. The other guys got held up, and I escaped. And they gave them long jail sentences. Because when I escaped in Bells, I went straight to Jacko Flat. When I was going to grammar school, I was part of the Duke of Edinburgh's Award bronze team, and we had gone there as part of the expedition which you need to go through to get the award. We had gone to that historical place, and I understood
Jacko Flat. That's in Bells.
Yeah.
What historical? What award is that historical?
That is where Negma war. That is the camp of a Negma war leader, Jacko.
Okay.
Yes, Jacko is the name of a Negma war leader, and that was his camp. He built 100 steps going down to the river out of the rock, and there were pulleys on the side of the rock. I think it was to either bring up luggage and thing to his camp, and so you could see visible aspects of his presence there.
Yeah.
And I understood according to the location I was when they found them, and I understood where I was, so I ran to the direction of the Jacko Flat, and I found it. I didn't know the area well, but I just had a sense of direction, and I got Jacko Flat, and I went down to the river, Islayo River, passing through it, and I crossed the river because when we went there, they said there's a house on the other side of the river. That's what the teacher told us. Yeah. So I couldn't see the house, but I went and looked for the house, and I got the house, and there was dashing plant around there, and there was the house. I went to the house, and I got dry clothes. I got matches because you look in the dry clothes for the matches. Yeah. And I make a fire and I cook. Yeah. And I cook food and I ate.
What food you cook?
I cook dashing, and I put coconut milk in it and the dashing bush. Because I don't need a grater to grate a coconut. In those days, we just use a piece of the coconut shell, hard coconut shell. We break the coconut in half, and we scrape it. We scrape it and fine pieces, just like a grater. Yeah. So I was able to cook food and things. But as I was showing you, I think I was all protected by the spirits of the Negma wars. Who were brutally slaughtered in Roseau. Yes. That some kind of revenge.
Jacko Flat. I would like to go there, boy.
Yeah, we can go there.
Yeah, man. We're still to go there, Rasta.
It became very very glaring that they were trying to destabilize us.
Okay.
And extinct us. The kind of propaganda that was going about, and Patrick John, well, the authorities, they had the means of they control the media, and I think that is what that they were using to really spread the propaganda that was being disseminated. And the people, because they alone was disseminating the information, and the people would believe in, and many people were discouraged. The attitude towards the Dreads was very discouraging. Even youth that would want to be part of it, they were discouraged because of the attitude. And then I realized something. They were trying to exterminate us. They were trying to get rid of us.
Yeah.
So because the propaganda was getting worse and worse, until I was hearing them saying, we are thieves. I was so amazed because I know we had pride ourselves on purity. We started off as being pure and wanting to be pure. When we became Dread, you had to be committed to be a Dread. You had to be a clean person. No one would be admitted into our ranks if they were a known criminal. Not even if you smoke cigarette, you would be admitted into our ranks. A homosexual could never be admitted into our ranks.
Fire.
And if one wasn't of too much of a strong moral, they wanted to do part of that. They would have to show. They would have to show that they were willing to drop their ways, their dirty ways, and they would have to prove to us that they had abandoned their ways before we associated with them. In those days, you couldn't have locks if you weren't committed, because the treatment towards locks people was so terrible that you had to be committed. You had to be a committed liberator to have locks in those days. Even smoking marijuana, it was so controversial that we even when we were hiding in the bushes, we still was anxious about the police coming and finding us. It wasn't like walking down the road and smoking. We had to hide and smoke.
The scent, everything.
The scent, they would follow the scent.
Yeah.
Follow the scent and come and look for you.
Yeah.
So, but then it started to get worse where they started to say we were thieves. And as I show, we didn't, that wasn't part of our advocacy. Crime wasn't part of our advocacy. We were black advocates, black nationalistic advocates. And then they started to say, well, we are stealing food, and the amount of food we had, some guys they had estates, some friends had estates. Like I know the Winstons, the Shillingfords. How could these people would never be stealing? And they all group up everybody because one or two people were stealing.
You had Rasta in the Winstons? Who was the Rasta dreads?
Well, that were girls. You had one guy was from my class. He was Carl Winston. Then you had Dave, a younger brother, and then you had a sister. Maybe she's still alive with her locks today.
So is that those Winstons, are they related to the Winstons in Marigot?
I'm not sure,
okay.
But they are red people.
Okay.
They were from Loubier. They had an estate in Loubier. They were my friends, so I went to their home where they had land, where they had caterpillar too, because that was a caterpillar man. That was a man that their father cut the roads in a lot of places in Dominica. He was one of the early caterpillar men.
Okay.
So when I went by the land, I could see where they used the caterpillar to terrace their land.
Yeah.
And they all had bicycles and whatnot, and they were well off. They wouldn't be stealing, but they believe in the ideology. They believe in the dreads as many other bourgeois youths.
Yes.
So I know I became very suspicious when I see they were trying to use stealing as a pretext to destabilize us and to exterminate us. Because when Patrick John was drawing up his plans to crack down on us, he gave a speech on the radio, and he was saying that we were part of a plot to overthrow him. We were part of a plot to overthrow him because the Alliance Party, which was the guys whom we had left, these communist guys whom we had left, Rosie and Para Revere and these guys, they were heading a political organization that was about to overthrow him, and we were we were like mercenaries for them, that we were being hired to attack his government and to overthrow him. That is what he went on the radio and say, and he said that it would be bullet for bullet and guns for guns and grenade for grenade.
Wow.
And he had this long, almost 4-hour speech and saying that everything we were doing was to prepare ourselves for an attack on his government. And I could see things was getting real tight, that he was about to do something about.
So why do you think he was doing that?
Well, it was because of the instigation by the bourgeois, because our revolution, our cultural revolution, was going to usurp the capitalistic plans for the island. They had, because we were turning people away from consumer goods, in like chemicals and so on. We were turning people onto natural food and eat what you grow. We don't trust things from overseas, and it was taking root. A lot of people were going natural, and they were vegetarian, even though they didn't have locks. You know, so the bourgeois saw that as like we were shafting, the plans to turn the island into a consumer good island, where they would have, as it is this day, where they sell the consumer goods freely, KFC and all the genetic engineered foods that do it at best price, and all this, those big supermarkets. Those were the guys who who later going to arm themselves against us together with the police. Patrick John is spreading this propaganda, they are working up themselves to a crackdown. They are spreading propaganda to give them credibility to do a thorough job on us. So they are saying we are about to attack them. Patrick John is saying we are about to install the Alliance Party, that is, that those communist guys now. It's a long time we had left those communist guys, and no, we would join back. We would get with them again.
So what happened next then? No, okay.
So then, at a certain time, the Dread Act was enacted in Parliament soon, and it was unanimously with a bipartisan bill passed. Only one member abstained from voting on that bill, and it was the member for the Marigot constituency, the son of Mr. W. Stevens, Pat Stevens, who represented Marigot at the time.
Pat Stevens. Say that again first, say that again.
Yeah. So the bill was passed in Parliament with a unanimous decision by both sides, opposition and ruling party. The Dread Act was passed with one member of Parliament abstaining. Only he was on the opposition side, because I think he was still an independent member of representing in Parliament, representing Marigot. So Pat Stevens abstained, and I was so gratified. I was so, like elated to know. He's my cousin. We grew up together, and he understood what was happening, and he didn't support our extermination. I mean, up to this day, I'm happy about that. And so it was passed, and a deadline was set. What we were given, maybe a couple months, not more than 2 months, to recant. That if we would recant, then we could save our lives, because we were going to be shot on sight.
Recant for what?
Recant from being a Dread. All our ideas would have to leave us.
So let me ask a question. So the story focus you on Honey Trade Senior now. What does it tie into
that
the
came
story?
up later. It doesn't tie in there yet.
Oh, it's after.
That doesn't come in
and
there
they make
yet.
it seem as if it's
No, that doesn't come in there yet. It don't come in yet. Pocoyo is not on the scene yet. Only after Hurricane David can Pocoyo come on the scene. During Eugenia's reign.
Okay.
No, what done is not there.
Okay, so continue then.
You are recording all that?
Yeah, all I really recording.
Yeah, yes. In Patrick John, Pocoyo was not in Patrick John time. So we had to fight the Dread Act. We, the Dreads,
those, the ideology was under attack.
Yes.
It was an ideology. It wasn't the individuals. It wasn't crime. It's ideology, and we decided when we would stand up. So we were given time to recant while they build their forces.
Yes.
So the policemen and the defense, they had a defense force. They joined together. According to the Dread Act, they represented the force together with all the businessmen armed in Roseau. All the businessmen were given permission to carry arms and to shoot us on sight. Together with the policemen and the defense force. The Dread Act termed it as the force. Free militias against us. Unarmed youths. Under 20 years. Most of us under 20. And we have to face this terrible situation in Dominica. A force. They got arms from America. That's the time they got SLRs. And other serious arms. They used
SLRs.
Yeah, they used to have 303s on the island, but then they got SLRs. The defense got SLRs, the policemen, and they got dogs, hounds from England, and they were trained to use them, in a hunt and kill campaign against us.
Hunt and kill capacity.
Campaign against us. You check me? Yeah. So they were building their forces, and we were supposed to be there trembling, because to imagine that we know nothing about what these people are talking about, and they're coming as though we are armed, and we are not armed. By that time, most of the guns we had disappeared somehow. Maybe the policeman got back because different things happened, and all we have is cutlasses. For sure, all we have is
so where the gunmen passed now?
I don't know where they passed the gun. The policemen made different raids, and guns disappeared.
Yeah.
We weren't prepared an armed conflict with them. We weren't prepared that, so we just wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
We were out to eat idols and drink spring water and to talk about the truth about Africa. That is what we were about. We weren't about building arms and so on. Somehow we didn't have arms, and we just imagining that fake, crackdown on us. And at the time before the time expire, some guys cut their locks. Some guys tried to leave the island with their locks. Some were successful. And at the time, I was with about 20 guys on a piece of land for Desmond Trotter's family. On an estate they call Babia. It's overlooking Roseau. And we were about almost 20 of us there. It was the same situation, and we know the Dread Act is going to enact. And I see some guys, they're making holsters for cutlasses. They're cutting cutlasses in all shapes to look dangerous and to be prepared to act, hanging it on their back, putting it on their side. Cutlasses alone we have, but they know we're just freaking out because we cannot take on guns with cutlasses. But we're just freaking out with the little time we have while we plan our response, because I personally decided I would go with my locks, and three guys, two other guys and myself, we planned that. Everybody had to plan their response to that. If you decide to cut your locks, cut your locks. As the only time we were left on our own to decide what we had to do. We didn't have to adhere to the obligation anymore. That's the first time all members will let off the obligation, because as a member before the Dread Act, you had to keep the obligation or otherwise.
So what was the name of that member of that group at that time as a member? What was the name of it? All of that name?
No, it was just a group of Dreads there. They happened to be there.
Okay,
it wasn't any special organization. It was just Dreads that from all parts of Dominica that happened to be there at the time, because just kind of looking for rescue. We got ourselves together there and just looking at the days ahead. How we going to deal with the days ahead? And everybody were left on their own. Who decided to cut their locks? Who decided to go away with their locks? I and some other guys, two other guys decided to go away, but we got our money late. We got the money late to leave. So the very day we were about to leave, they cracked down. They cracked down in Marigot. We came to Marigot and had contacted 2 fishermen to take us away from the Marigot Bay. But then the day before the crackdown, and we were going to move very early in the morning of the deadline. The time they gave us would expire, and they came in Marigot the day before. I'm not sure. I just wonder if they knew our plans. If one of those guys. And I suspect one of the guys that were with me was a plant. It's amazing to hear me say that one of the big threats was planted by the authorities to bring us down. And I suspected that, and I still hold that view, and he was with me there planning. So I don't know if that's why they came to Margaret and stall the move, and I had to cut my locks when they were.
So which one of the dreads that now? I mean,
I wouldn't even call his name because I wouldn't call his name.
So all of us were struggling with our response to the Dread Act. And I finally had to cut my locks because I was stalled. And the other 2 guys who were with me, they left me and they went to Roseau. When I heard about them again, they were in prison. A squad of police saw them because they left the very day the Dread Act had expired. The time of that they had given us had expired, and they got a lift. They got the hitchhiker truck, and they were at the back of the truck, and a squad of police saw them and took them off the truck and carried and jailed them for 9 months for having locks. Although they had cut their locks, but they recognized them as notorious dreads. So they took 9 months jail. I stayed in Marigot, and my parents had put me out of their house because that.
So you got your locks at that time there?
Yes, my locks was cut. That was the day the Dread Act, the expired date for us to recant. That was the very day they had come from Marigot, rampage Marigot, with spitting fire when they came in at West. They had arrested 2 guys who had locks. Eunice, he was a business student, like in St. Augustine. He's from, he's a Robinson, and his cousin Gerard Robinson. They had locks and they took them to jail. Gerard never went in the hills. He was just a guy around the village helping out his grandmother by the shop. Eunice himself was on holiday from Trinidad, and his mother has a shop. He would help out in the shop. I never knew he came with us because all of us had plots, had farm plots, and I never knew he came with anybody on the farm, to be part of what was going on in the hills. Yet he was the one arrested, and taken to jail because they caught him with his locks and things. And he was lucky they didn't shoot him because they came in shooting, and the guys ran. And I think they came in the area where I lived on at 4 Road, and there was a place we used to prepare food for a bar we had named Culture Corner, and a guy was there, a brother was there, cooking some bread nuts, and they were firing at him, but he held the pot of bread nut and ran with it. And with fire, under fire, but he ran with his bread nut. He wanted to eat his bread nut.
Yes.
But he used to be a cadet in grammar school, so I figure he would know how to run. When bullets are being fired. So he got away, and I stayed in the village from then, but then there was a group of guys who held their ground. They mounted an armed resistance in the hills against to secure our rights, our human rights and self-expression. And I hail them today. And
that was
Mal and a group of guys, and some of them died. The odds were so great against them, and to see that they were going to stand up to the last man, so they mounted a resistance, armed resistance, and they fell back in the mountains, and they would just wait for the policemen to attack them and defend themselves and so on, move, doing a kind of guerrilla style movement, and they were able to resist up to the time when the government decided, well, we have to sign a truce with them, and I hailed them that they could sustain the battle till it ended in a treaty which was signed at Pokase in the police station. It had a police station there at the time, so they were asked to bring in their weapons, which they did, and the policemen came there unarmed, and they wanted to make sure that no guns would be there. because they had killed policemen, they had killed soldiers who had attacked them. For most of them, more men had died, more Dreads had died, but policemen died and soldiers had died in the hill. So they didn't want any retaliation for that. So they make sure that wasn't going to happen. And they did sign a treaty in Bells, which of course you can get the full contents of it in the ministry, because it's there. And that is how we got a relief in 1975. That was signed, and we got a little relief.
So then where was them time?
I was in Dominica. I was in Marigot. Yeah. I was going to the hills with my parents. I was doing a lot of work in the hills.
And when you hearing about that?
I was hearing about that. And
then time you checking boy the man.
There was even one time when I was called to a delegation to go and see Patrick John after the Dread Act and for him and to get his commitment that he wouldn't attack us again. And he did give this commitment, but I always was suspicious about him. Somehow I didn't trust him.
But what year did Dread Act pass?
In 74.
74.
Mm-hmm. So by 75, we had sustained the battle to 75, somewhere in 75 when the treaty was signed.
So when was the Dread Act done then?
The Dread Act wasn't done. The Dread Act, what this treaty that held them off from us for a while. Imagine we signing a treaty, to cease hostilities.
But if there's that treaty,
that don't change the Dread Act.
That was just for Mal and his people, them.
For the Dreads.
For that section of Dread there.
No, it was for it. They were fighting the general cause. They know they were fighting. We know they were fighting the general cause.
That's what I'm trying to understand, because the Dread Act is still in effect, and as far as I know, the Dread Act was abolished in 79, right?
It could have. Well, I'm just telling you, to cease the hostility at the time. The Dread Act is there, but to cease the hostility at the time, I don't think they went further to seek to repeal the Dread Act. You check? I don't think they went in.
So after that, we never had no police hunting on the
Yes. We weren't being harassed up to 77.
Okay.
And in 77, they broke all out. They violated the treaty, and they came down on us again. And that is the time I ran to Guadeloupe.
Okay. So did something happen why they violated the treaty in 77?
They were just not genuine to their cause. Because we were being Rastas again. We were having our locks, so we still had our ideas, and maybe they thought, well, they shouldn't let us go. It's like Pharaoh.
So when they stand back in 77, but I don't think they'll maybe mess with Mal and then they leave Mal and them alone.
No, man. Mal got prison. Mal had to pay how much dollars after that. They actually go on Mal personally and arrested Mal. And then times Mal had marijuana and he had money and and they took the money and they charged him money and they jailed him.
Wow.
That was the kind of violation they did. But the might is right. It just show that as it is today. The
student learn from the teacher.
The
student learn from the teacher and apply it to the rest.
Yeah, might is right, and that is what happened. And when they came down in 77, I and 4 guys from Marigot escaped to Guadeloupe with our locks. You check?
Yes.
This time our mission was successful. You stop it, right?
No, continue.
Yeah, our mission was successful. 4 of us went away because actually, when they started to rampage in 77, I told the guys in Marigot, we have to fight. Because that is the only way we're going to get relief and for locks to grow in Dominica. I told them, if you see me don't stand up, there will never be locks in Dominica. Dominica will never know consciousness. They're going to wipe it out completely, and we cannot allow that. So I said, let's go to the hills. And they were all coming to the hills. All those guys, about 6 guys. And at one point I see, but maybe these guys are going to die, and I'll feel responsible for them because I pushing for them to go to war. And I said, well, if somebody can possibly have money to hire a boat, I will go away. And then maybe you all will cut all your locks because I'm the one who really wants to stand up. And I know if I go, it will diffuse the situation. So somebody said they had
They had money to hire a boat. So I say, well, if your boat is going to be on the water, all who want to come on the boat, let's go away. So 4 of us decided we would go on and we went to Guadeloupe. And that is where I met other migrant refugees from Dominica, guys who had fled Dominica because of the Dread Act and were finding a safe haven in Guadeloupe. So that is where Cadence music started, because that is where we found a safe haven, and they were persecuting us for our locks there, and we could express ourselves. The people didn't accept our expression at first on the ground, but the authorities didn't provoke us because of our locks and our ideas. So now, even the Cadence music was financed, which couldn't happen here because of the controversial ideas of Cadence music. It wasn't being financed by Dominicans, and those guys got financiers and producers in Guadeloupe. And so they documented the advocacy. The Cadence music is a complete documentation of our advocacy. It says everything that we used to, all that we represented, all our ideas, and you can get everything that we were doing and that we stood for in Cadence music. The only thing is that it is in patois, it's in Creole, and Margot people doesn't understand it. But the other people that understand it, they learn, they get ideas. It's philosophical, it's spiritual.
Maybe you should translate it.
It's not. Yes, it's nationalistic. For example, the first song that burst the Cadence music and made it popular was a song, a slave song. So much we were touched, and so much the ideas came from the slave, our problem, our controversial stand on the slave trade, that it came out like no travail pour rien. Like we work for nothing. And tell me, where did you sell my mother? Where did you sell my father? Because we understand the simulation that they were taking, we were being through, and how effective it was being, that they were splitting us, splitting families, sending a parent to another country, putting an uncle in St. Lucia, putting an auntie in Antigua, and all those type of things, not putting slaves together so that the simulation of us, like would be so effective that we wouldn't be able to communicate, and whatever indoctrination they were going to do to us would be very effective. Now that was where we were cut off from our ancestors. So when Cadence music was launched, it was launched with "Nous travail pour ailleurs, dis-moi, ola ou van, papa moi, tell me, where did you sell my father? Tell me, where did you sell my mother? We travail for it, for nothing. That was how Cadence music started, and that became a hit. And from that, it was like an example for all the francophone colonized countries, all in Africa. They gravitated towards the lyrics. It's like they were waiting for lyrics like that, and we were the ones who were convinced that this was important information, and this was an important direction, and we were so inspired by our ancestors that we wanted to show it, to the world, and we knew it would resonate with oppressed people, and it did, and that is why we weren't being financed by Dominicans. They thought it controversial, and in Guadeloupe, they financed it up to a time when they thought, well, they saw we were making the money on it, that it was, and that they could capitalize on such type of music and do their own thing. So they move away from financing Cadence, and they develop a genre called Zouk, and we are going to go forward with Zouk. So they dropped the bands, the Cadence bands they were financing, and even at that time, Dominicans didn't pick up on the slack. they let the Cadence bands go down. Nobody financed Cadence
Mm.
until it went down, because they always saw it as a controversial lyrics. Now you have Booyah coming on the scene now. Booyah came as a,
Rasta, we the cut there now. Eh?